The eviction notice was still on my door when I left for the port. Austin Allen had taped it there himself that morning, yellow paper folded once, my name printed across the front in that cheap inkjet font landlords love. I didn't pull it down. Figured it didn't matter much either way. I had until the end of the month. That gave me 11 days to come up with $2,400, which was rent plus late fees plus whatever other line items Austin had worked into the balance. I didn't have it. Hadn't had it in weeks. My checking account was sitting at maybe $300, and my credit cards were all maxed or close enough that the difference didn't mean anything. So, yeah. I took the job. It wasn't a good job. Wasn't even really a clear job. Eli Tucker, my union contact, called me on a Tuesday and said he had an overnight maintenance slot at APM terminals if I wanted it, midnight to 8. Starts Thursday. I said yeah before he finished talking. Eli didn't ask if I was okay with the hours, or if I had transportation or any of that. He just said the pay was union scale, benefits kicked in after 90 days, and they needed someone who could handle basic industrial work without supervision. Then he texted me an address and a name. That was it. I knew Eli from back when I was still working steady. He was a shop steward at one of the refineries up in Torrance, the kind of guy who knew everyone and kept numbers in his phone instead of writing them down. Good guy, practical. If Eli said a job was real, it was real. I didn't ask him why they were hiring so fast or why he thought of me. Probably he knew I was in a spot. People talk. The refinery circuit isn't that big, and after my back went out, I'd been bouncing between temp gigs for almost a year. Word gets around. The back injury happened at a Chevron site in El Segundo. I was pulling a seized valve off a high-pressure line, and the wrench slipped, torqued my whole spine sideways, felt like someone stuck a knife between my vertebrae and twisted. I finished the shift because I'm an idiot, then spent 3 weeks flat on my couch eating ibuprofen and waiting for the workers' comp people to decide if they believed me. They did, eventually. Paid for an MRI and some physical therapy. But by the time I could work again, Chevron had filled my spot and the union couldn't place me anywhere long-term. Too much liability, I think. Once you're marked as someone who got hurt, supervisors start looking at you different. After that, it was just temp work. A week here, 4 days there. I fixed conveyor motors at a sorting facility in Carson. Did valve maintenance at a water treatment plant. Spent 2 months troubleshooting electrical panels for a contractor who paid in cash and didn't ask about my back. It was enough to keep the lights on mostly, but it wasn't steady, and steady was what I needed. Jenna left around the same time the temp work started. We'd been married 6 years, together for 8. She didn't make a big scene about it, just said she couldn't do it anymore. The money, the uncertainty, me lying on the couch every night too tired or too sore to talk. I got it. Didn't mean it didn't suck. She took the decent furniture and half the savings, which was fair since she'd been the one putting money into savings while I was busy getting my spine wrenched apart for $18 an hour. I kept the apartment because my name was on the lease and she didn't want it. That felt like a win until I realized I couldn't actually afford it on my own. Credit cards kept me going for a while. I'd float rent on a Visa, pay the minimum with whatever I made that month, then push the next month's rent onto a MasterCard. It worked until it didn't. By the time Eli called, I owed maybe $14,000 across 4 cards, and the interest was compounding faster than I could pretend to keep up. Austin didn't care about any of that. He just wanted his money on the first, and when I didn't have it by the 10th, he started the eviction process. Can't blame him, really. He owns 6 units in the building, and if he let people slide, he'd be out of business. Still felt pretty cold when he showed up at 7 in the morning with his tape gun and his yellow paper. I didn't answer the door when he knocked, just waited until I heard him walk away, then looked through the peephole and saw the notice flapping against the frame. So yeah, the port job was everything. It was rent, it was keeping my car insured, it was maybe starting to chip away at the credit cards if I got lucky. I wasn't about to ask questions. I left Long Beach a little after 11. The port was only 15 minutes south, down Ocean Boulevard and onto Terminal Island. But I wanted to give myself time in case I got lost. I'd driven past the port 1,000,000 times, but never actually gone inside. Just seen it from the freeway. Those huge cranes and container stacks stretching out toward the water. At night it looked different, bigger. The streetlights stopped at the gate, and past that it was just work lights and floods, everything washed out in white and shadow. The container stacks rose up on both sides of the road, taller than most buildings, just these perfect geometric walls of steel. Red ones, blue ones, some with Chinese characters stenciled on the side. They blocked out the sky. The cranes were worse. They sat along the berths like something out of a nightmare, huge and skeletal, their arms reaching out over the water. I could see a couple of them moving, lifting containers off a ship that was lit up bow to stern. It didn't look real. Looked like toys maybe, or models. But the sound was real enough. Metal scraping metal, diesel engines grinding, the low, steady hum of a place that didn't stop moving. I followed the signs toward berth 136, past a guard shack where a guy in a yellow vest waved me through without looking up, past truck lanes and stacks of chassis and a warehouse with its bay doors open, forklifts moving inside, nobody around, just machines. The HR trailer was tucked behind a chain-link fence near a row of parked vehicles. It was small, one of those portable units they drop onto job sites, white with a metal step and a dim light over the door. I parked in the gravel lot next to it and sat there for a second, engine running, trying to convince myself this was fine. It was fine. It was a job. Midnight to 8, union scale. Eli vouched for it. I turned the car off and got out. The woman inside looked tired. She was maybe 40, short, black hair tied back in a ponytail. She had a laminated ID clipped to her vest and a desk covered in paperwork that didn't seem organized in any particular way. She glanced up when I opened the door. "Help you?" "I'm Charles Nelson," I said. "Starting tonight, maintenance." She nodded and pulled a clipboard from the stack, flipped through a couple pages. "Yeah, Eli called it in. You got your ID?" I handed her my driver's license. She looked at it, typed something into a laptop that was older than my car, then slid a form across the desk. "Fill this out, front and back." It was the usual stuff: name, address, social security, emergency contact. I left the emergency contact blank because I couldn't think of anyone who'd actually answer. Jenna wouldn't. My parents were in Oregon and we didn't talk much. Eli maybe, but that felt weird. The woman didn't notice, just took the form back when I was done and stapled it to something else. Then she looked at me again, really looked, and her expression shifted a little. Not unfriendly, just careful. "Eli mentioned you had a back injury," she said. "Yeah, a couple months ago. It's fine now. You get clearance from a doctor?" Workers' comp cleared me. That was technically true. They'd stopped paying for therapy, which I figured meant they thought I was good to go. She nodded slowly, didn't look convinced, but she didn't push it. "All right, you're going to be working with Maxwell Herman. He's lead electrician on the overnight. You report to him. He reports to me if there's a problem." "Got it." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a laminated card about the size of a credit card, handed it to me. "Read that. Those are the rules, non-negotiable." I looked at the card. It had maybe 10 lines of text, all in bold. "Stay within your assigned zone. Do not approach active cranes without clearance. Report all malfunctions immediately. Do not enter marked restricted areas. Stay off lane C after 0200. There were a few more, but those were the ones that stuck. The phrasing was weird. Not safety rules exactly, more like warnings. "Lane C?" I said. "You'll see it on the map Maxwell gives you. Just stay off it after 2. She said it flat, the way you'd tell someone not to park in a loading zone. "Why?" "Because those are the rules." I waited for more, but she just looked at me, not hostile, just done talking. "Okay," I said. She stood up and opened a cabinet, pulled out a yellow vest and a hard hat, handed them to me. Maxwell's out at berth 140, straight down the main road, left at the fuel depot. You'll see his truck. Thanks. I turned to go, but she said my name. I looked back. You need this job? She asked. Yeah. She nodded. Didn't say anything else. Just looked at me for a second, then sat back down and went back to her paperwork. I stepped outside, and the door clicked shut behind me. The air smelled like diesel and salt water. Somewhere in the distance, a crane was moving, its arms swinging slow across the sky. I got in my car and looked at the laminated card again. Stay off lane C after 0200. Weird, but not impossible. I figured every place had its own rules. I put the card in my pocket, started the engine, and headed toward berth 140. I sat in my car outside the HR trailer and pulled out the laminated card again. The overhead work lights were bright enough to read by, and I figured I should know what I was getting into before I met this Maxwell guy. The rules weren't numbered, just listed out in bold text, one after the other. Stay out of lane C between 02:17 and 02:19 hours. That was the one the woman had mentioned. Specific times, not just after 2 a.m. like she'd said. 2:17 to 2:19, 2 minutes. Weird window, but okay. If you find a container door unsealed and cracked open, close it and walk away. Do not look inside. I read that one twice. Close it and walk away. Don't look inside. That seemed pretty clear, I guess. Probably some liability thing. Customs issue, maybe. Never answer a handheld radio if the voice uses your full name. That one bugged me a little. Who else would be using the radios? And why would using my full name matter? I thought about asking the woman, but she'd already made it clear she wasn't going to explain anything. If you see water dripping upward beneath an active crane, locate the red disconnect and cut power immediately. Then walk to the nearest lit area and call this number. There was a phone number printed below that one. I didn't write it down. Figured the card would stay in my pocket. Water dripping upward. That had to be some kind of mechanical thing I didn't understand yet. Hydraulic pressure, maybe. Something that meant the crane was about to fail. Leave the facility at sunrise using the same gate you entered. Do not use alternate exits. Simple enough. In and out the same way. The last line was smaller, not bold. These rules are for your safety. Maxwell Herman has worked here for 3 years and will explain procedures as needed. Follow his lead. 3 years. That was decent tenure for contract work. I folded the card back into my pocket, started the engine, and pulled out of the gravel lot. The main road through the terminal was wider than I expected. 2 lanes in each direction, faded yellow lines, massive overhead lights every 50 feet or so. I passed stacks of containers on both sides. Reds, blues, whites, all of them marked with shipping company logos I halfway recognized. Maersk, Evergreen, Costco. The fuel depot was easy to spot. Big chain-link fence, diesel pumps, a small booth that looked empty. I turned left and saw the truck almost immediately. It was a white Ford F-250, older model, parked near a low concrete building with a roll-up door. Someone was leaning against the tailgate, arms crossed, watching me pull up. I parked next to the truck and got out. The guy pushed off the tailgate and walked over. Tall, maybe 6'1", wiry build, wearing work gloves and a high-vis vest over a long-sleeve shirt. His hard hat was sitting on the truck bed. He looked me over once, then nodded. You, Nelson? Yeah, Charles. Maxwell Herman. He didn't offer his hand, just tilted his head toward the truck. You can call me Maxwell. Everybody does. Okay. Sadie tell you the rules? Gave me the card. Good. You read it? Yeah. You get it? I hesitated. Some of it. Maxwell grinned a little. Dry, not mean. That's honest. Most guys say yes and then do something stupid by 0300. He turned and grabbed his hard hat, then pulled a folded map out of his back pocket. Come here. I'll show you the layout. He spread the map on the truck bed. It was a printed diagram of the terminal, black lines on white paper, labeled with berth numbers and lane letters. Someone had drawn on it in red pen. Circles, X marks, notes in the margins. Maxwell tapped a spot near the bottom. We're here. Berth 140. Maintenance zone runs from here to here. He traced a rectangle with his finger. 6 berths, maybe 40 cranes total, depending on what's active. Our job is to check electrical connections, grease motors, swap out bulbs, that kind of thing. Nothing complicated. Okay. Most of the cranes are automated. They'll keep running while we work. You stay clear of the rails and you're fine. He pointed to a red circle on the map. This is Lane C, runs parallel to berth 142. You don't go near it between 0217 and 0219. Why those times? Maxwell looked at me, not annoyed, just measuring. Because that's when the foghorn goes off. Foghorn. Yeah. What's that got to do with the lane? He folded the map back up and stuffed it in his pocket. You'll hear it. When you do, you make sure you're nowhere near Lane C. That's it. I wanted to push, but his tone said the conversation was over. I let it go. Maxwell grabbed a clipboard from the truck cab and scanned it. Tonight's light, couple bulb replacements, 1 motor inspection on crane 7, and a circuit check near the fuel line. Should be done by 0600 if nothing breaks. He glanced at me. Sadie mentioned you're back? Yeah. It good? Good enough. You tell me if it's not. I'm not carrying you out of here if you tweak it on a ladder. Fair. He tossed the clipboard back in the truck and pulled out a handheld radio, clipped it to his vest, then handed me a second one. Channel 3. You don't answer unless it's me or Sadie. Got it? Yeah. What's your full name? Charles Nelson. Anybody calls you that on the radio, you don't answer. You turn it off and you find me. I remembered the rule. Never answer a handheld radio if the voice uses your full name. Why? Maxwell slammed the truck door and locked it. Because that's the rules. He said it the same way the woman had. Flat. Final. We climbed into a maintenance cart, electric, 4 seats, flatbed in the back, loaded with toolboxes and coils of wire. Maxwell drove. He steered us down the main road, past the container stacks, toward a row of cranes lit up against the night sky. He kept talking as we rolled. Casual stuff. Complaints about seagulls nesting in the motor housings. A work order last month that had him replacing a breaker box that didn't need replacing. How the day shift always left the carts uncharged. But the whole time his eyes kept moving, scanning the rows, the service roads, the gaps between containers. I noticed it maybe 5 minutes in. The way he'd glance left, then right, then check the rearview mirror mounted on the cart. Not paranoid. Methodical. Guys on job sites did that sometimes when they were working near heavy equipment, staying aware. But there wasn't any active machinery near us, just stacked containers and empty road. It felt like he thought the yard was going to move when he wasn't looking. I didn't say anything, just watched the cranes get closer. We'd been working maybe an hour when I heard it. Low, deep, long. A foghorn. I stopped mid-reach for a wrench and looked around. The sound didn't come from the water. It came from inside the yard. Somewhere past the container stacks to our left. Maxwell was up on the crane platform with me, checking a junction box. He went still. The horn blew again. Same tone. Same length. I checked my watch. 2:17 a.m. Maxwell snapped the junction box shut, grabbed his tool bag, and headed for the ladder. We're moving. What? Now, Charles. Let's go. I followed him down. My back tightened on the last few rungs, but I ignored it. By the time I hit the ground, Maxwell was already in the driver's seat of the cart, engine humming. I climbed in and he took off. Not fast, steady, controlled. But he didn't slow for the turn and he didn't look back. What's going on? Lane C's that way. He jerked his chin toward the left. We're going this way. because of the horn. Yeah. The horn sounded a third time, farther away now, or maybe quieter. Hard to tell. Maxwell kept his eyes forward. You're gonna feel it sometimes. A pull. Like you should go check something out, or maybe you heard someone calling for help. You ignore it. Ignore what? Whatever tries to get you to go toward lane C during the horn. I looked at him. His jaw was tight, hands steady on the wheel, but his shoulders were tense. You're serious. Dead serious. The horn cut off. Silence dropped back over the yard. Just the hum of the cart and the distant clank of a crane unloading somewhere in the active section. Maxwell exhaled. Didn't say anything. I tried to make it make sense. Workplace superstition. Every site had some. Don't walk under a suspended load. Don't whistle in a refinery. Don't use the north bathroom after midnight because the plumbing's shit and nobody wants to fix it. But the timing was exact. 2:17. The woman had known. Maxwell had known, and he'd moved fast. I settled back in the seat and watched the container rows slide past. We were rolling deeper into the yard now, past berths I didn't recognize, under cranes I hadn't seen yet. The horn stuck with me, the way it felt. Not like a warning, like something opening. I kept my mouth shut and my hands on the rail as Maxwell drove us further into the night. The radio clipped to Maxwell's vest made a sharp beeping sound around 02:45. He pulled it off and held it close to his ear. I couldn't hear what the voice said, but Maxwell's jaw tightened. He thumbed the transmit button. Copy, en route. He shoved the radio back on his vest and pointed at the cart. Reefer alarm at crane 5. Breaker trip probably. I grabbed my tool bag and climbed in. Maxwell was already driving before I'd settled into the seat. Reefer alarms were common enough. Refrigerated containers ran on external power while they sat in the yard, and the breakers tripped all the time. Voltage spikes, bad wiring, moisture in the connections. Standard maintenance call. Reset the breaker, check the connection, log it, move on. I'd done dozens of them at the Chevron site on different equipment, but same principle. Maxwell drove us past 2 container rows and hung a right at a painted yellow arrow on the asphalt. The work lights overhead flickered once, then held. I didn't mention it. Maxwell didn't either. Crane 5 sat near the eastern edge of our zone, close to where the berths ended and the container stacks started. The crane itself was idle, arms locked in the resting position. Below it, a single white refrigerated container sat on a chassis, humming, except the hum sounded off. Too low. The kind of sound a motor makes when it's not getting enough power or the compressor's struggling. Maxwell parked the cart 10 feet back and killed the engine. He didn't get out right away. Just sat there, hands on the wheel, scanning the area. Left, right, behind us. I waited. Figured he was doing his thing. Finally, he climbed out and walked toward the container. I followed, tool bag slung over one shoulder. My back was tight from the earlier ladder work, but it wasn't bad. Just a reminder. The container had a standard reefer unit mounted on the front end, big rectangular box with vents and a control panel. The panel was lit, which meant it had some power. The readout showed 18 degrees Celsius, too warm for a refrigerated load. The breaker box sat on a pole about 3 feet from the container, mounted at chest height. Maxwell opened it and checked inside. He didn't say anything, just stepped back and gestured for me to look. I leaned in. The breaker was tripped, just like the work order said. Simple fix. Flip it back, check the load, make sure it holds. I reached for it, then stopped. Something felt off. Maxwell was already walking around the side of the container. I followed him. That's when I saw it. The container door wasn't sealed. The metal bolt that should have been locked down with a custom seal was loose, and the door sat open maybe half an inch. Just a finger width. Enough to see the gap, but not enough to see inside. I stopped walking. Maxwell kept going, circling to the back. The seal was missing entirely, not broken, missing. The bolt where it should have been was clean. No scratched metal, no torn plastic tag, nothing. It looked like someone had just removed it. Maxwell came back around and stood next to me. He stared at the gap for a few seconds, then looked at me. "See it?" he said. "Yeah, no seal." "Right." I looked at the door again. The gap bothered me. If the door was open, the refrigeration wouldn't hold. Warm air would seep in, spoil the load, cost someone a lot of money. The breaker might have tripped because the unit was working overtime trying to cool the whole damn yard. My brain went into mechanic mode, fix the problem, close the door, reset the breaker, log the missing seal for the day shift to handle with customs. Standard procedure. I'd done it 100 times in different contexts. You see something wrong, you fix it. That's the job. I stepped toward the door and reached for the handle. Maxwell's hand clamped around my wrist. Hard. Not rough, but solid. The kind of grip that meant stop right now. I froze. He didn't say anything, just held my wrist and stared at the door. Then he let go, took one step forward, and kicked the door shut. The bang echoed off the container stacks behind us, loud and sharp in the quiet. The handle latched. The gap disappeared. Maxwell stepped back, pulled a rag from his pocket, and wiped his glove off. He didn't look at me. "Don't touch those," he said. "It was open. I know what you were doing." He shoved the rag back in his pocket. "You were fixing it, doing the normal thing. That's the problem." I didn't say anything. Maxwell turned and looked at me then. His face was calm, but his eyes weren't. Missing seals are bait. Bait for what? Doesn't matter. You see a container with no seal and the door open. You don't touch it. You don't look inside. You close it from the outside, log it, and walk away. He pointed at the door. You stick your head in there, you might not pull it back out. Or you do, and then you're part of the problem. Part of what problem? Maxwell didn't answer. He walked back to the breaker box, flipped the breaker, and waited. The reefer unit kicked on with a louder hum. The readout started dropping. 19 degrees, 18, 17. He watched it for another 10 seconds, then closed the breaker box and latched it. "Log it as a tripped breaker and a missing seal," he said. "Nothing else." He walked back to the cart and climbed in. I grabbed my tool bag and followed. My wrist still felt the pressure from his grip. We drove back toward the shop in silence. I kept thinking about the gap in the door, about reaching for it, about how automatic that had been. See a problem, fix a problem. Except here that instinct was wrong, and I didn't know why. Maxwell wasn't going to explain it either. He just kept driving, eyes forward, scanning the rows. The shop was a low concrete building near the fuel depot where we'd started the shift. Maxwell parked outside and killed the engine. "Need to grab a replacement sensor," he said. "One of the breaker cabinets near the water has been throwing errors." I followed him inside. The shop was bigger than it looked from outside. Long fluorescent lights overhead, metal shelving units along both walls stacked with parts, wire spools, tools. A workbench sat in the back, covered in disassembled equipment I didn't recognize. Everything smelled like grease and electrical burn and old coffee. Maxwell walked to the third shelf and started sorting through small cardboard boxes. I set my tool bag down near the door and leaned against the wall. My back was complaining a little, so I shifted my weight. That's when my radio crackled. Not Maxwell's. Mine. The voice came through clear and even. "Charles Nelson, please respond." I reached for the radio on my belt. Maxwell's head snapped toward me. "Charles Nelson, we need you at Lane C for a supervisor check. Please confirm." My thumb was on the transmit button. The voice sounded official, calm, the kind of tone you heard from dispatch or site managers. It felt automatic to answer. Confirm and comply. That's what you did. Maxwell crossed the shop in 3 steps and yanked the radio off my belt. His fingers found the battery pack and ripped it out. The voice cut off mid-word. I stared at him. He held the radio in one hand and the battery in the other. What did Sadie tell you? Don't answer if someone uses my full name. And what were you about to do? I didn't answer. My thumb still tingled where it had been pressing the button. Maxwell shoved the battery into his pocket and handed me the dead radio. The port learns names from paperwork. HR intake, work orders, union records. It uses them to get obedience. He stepped back and pointed at the radio. You hear your full name, you don't answer. You don't confirm. You turn it off and find me. That's the rule. Who was that? Doesn't matter. It sounded like dispatch. It wasn't. I clipped the dead radio back onto my belt. It felt heavier now. What happens if I answer? Maxwell turned and walked back to the shelves. You end up where they tell you to go, and then you don't come back, or you do, and you're different. He found the sensor he wanted and pulled it from the box. Either way, you're not you anymore. He walked past me toward the door. I grabbed my tool bag and followed. We spent the next 2 hours on routine work. Yard lights first, replaced 4 bulbs in the overhead standards along the main road, 2 of which had been out for weeks, judging by the rust in the sockets. Then breaker cabinets. Maxwell showed me how to check voltage on the terminal connections, how to spot corrosion before it caused a fault. We logged everything on his clipboard. He didn't talk much except to give instructions. I didn't ask questions. The work felt normal. Wrenches, wire, connections. Stuff I knew how to do. My hands remembered the motions, and my back held up well enough. A couple times I felt that tightness in my lower spine, but it passed. I kept moving, kept working, but the wrongness sat underneath it all. The missing seal, the voice on the radio, the foghorn from earlier, Maxwell's constant scanning, the rules that didn't make sense but were non-negotiable. It felt like working on equipment that looked fine from the outside but had something broken inside. Something you couldn't see until you opened it up. Except here, opening things up was exactly what you weren't supposed to do. We finished the last breaker cabinet around 4:30. Maxwell closed the panel and latched it, then checked his watch. He looked tired. Not sleepy tired. The other kind. 2 more on the list, he said. Relay check at berth 142 and a motor inspection on crane 9. Should be done by 6, if nothing else breaks. I nodded. The sky was still dark overhead, but it had that feeling like it was thinking about changing. Another hour, maybe 2, and the sun would start coming up. Maxwell climbed into the cart. I got in next to him. He drove us toward berth 142, taking the long route around the container stacks instead of cutting through. I didn't ask why. I was starting to understand that the routes mattered here. Where you went and when you went there. What you avoided. The wrongness didn't go away. It just sat there, quiet and sharp while we kept working. We pulled up under crane 7 at around 4:45. The sky was still dark, but it had that texture like it knew dawn was coming in an hour or so. Maxwell parked the cart 20 feet back from the base, killed the engine, and sat there doing his usual scan. Left, right, behind. I grabbed my tool bag and followed him out. The crane was idle, arms locked in resting position, no container hanging from the spreader. The whole thing was maybe 100 feet tall. Steel lattice painted that industrial yellow-orange that looks the same everywhere. I'd worked under plenty of cranes before. They're loud when they move and quiet when they don't. This one was quiet. Maxwell walked a slow circle around the base, checking the support legs and looking up at the cables. I followed with the bag. My back was holding up okay. A little tight in my lower spine, but nothing I couldn't ignore. That's when I saw the puddle. It was maybe 3 feet across, sitting right under the southeast support leg. Dark water, almost black under the work lights. Could have been hydraulic fluid or runoff from somewhere. Except it didn't smell like oil. It smelled like salt water and rust. I stopped walking and stared at it. The puddle wasn't flat. Little beads were forming on the surface. Not ripples. Beads. They lifted off the asphalt one at a time, tiny drops pulling themselves upward against gravity. I watched one bead hover for half a second, then drift up toward the steel leg like it was being drawn by a magnet. Then another. Then 3 more. I blinked and crouched down to get a better look. The beads kept forming, kept rising. They weren't falling. They were climbing. "Maxwell," I said. He was already next to me. I didn't hear him walk over. He looked at the puddle, then up at the crane leg where the beads were traveling. His jaw tightened. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he pointed. I followed his hand and saw the red disconnect box mounted on a pole maybe 10 feet away. Chest height, metal casing, big lever on the side. I'd seen 100 of them. Standard emergency shutoff for crane power. The laminated card in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. "Cut it," Maxwell said. I stood up, walked to the disconnect, and flipped the lever down. It clunked into place with that solid mechanical sound that means the circuit's open. No power running through. The crane kept humming, not loud, just a low vibration I could feel more than hear, like the steel was still live even though I'd just killed the feed. I turned back to the puddle. The beads weren't beads anymore. It was a stream now, steady, continuous, climbing the support leg in a thin line that defied every rule I knew about how water works. The stream thickened as I watched, widening from the width of a pencil to the width of my thumb, flowing upward along the steel. Then it wasn't a stream. It was a wall. A thin sheet of water coating the entire support leg, rising from the puddle on the ground and spreading up toward the crane's housing. It moved smooth and slow, no splashing, no dripping back down. Just climbing. I'd cut the power. The crane shouldn't have been doing anything. "Maxwell," I said again. He already had his phone out, not the radio. A cell phone, old model with a cracked screen. He held it to his ear and turned away from me slightly. "Sadie," he said. "We got a problem at Crane 7. I couldn't hear her response, but Maxwell's face didn't change. "Upward drip," he said. "Nelson cut the disconnect. Crane's still live." A pause. "Yeah." He followed the card. Another pause. Longer this time. Maxwell glanced at me, then back at the crane. The water wall was halfway up the leg now, maybe 40 feet high. It looked wrong. Not just physically impossible. Wrong in a way that made my stomach tighten. "How long?" Maxwell said into the phone. I heard Sadie's voice faintly, tinny through the speaker. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was clipped. Urgent. Maxwell nodded. "Copy. We're moving." He lowered the phone, but didn't hang up. He looked at me, and his expression was the same flat control he'd worn all night. But his eyes were different, sharper. "If power stays on after the disconnect," he said, "the crane isn't on the grid. Something else is feeding it." I stared at him. "What else?" "Don't know. Doesn't matter." He gestured toward the cart. "Sadie says we need eyes on lane C before 2:17. I checked my watch. It was 4:51. "That's over 9 hours from now," I said. Maxwell shook his head. "Not tonight. Next cycle. She means we check it now while the yard's waking up." "Waking up?" "That's what she said." He turned and walked back to the cart. I followed, glancing once more at the crane. The water had reached the housing now, spreading across the metal like a living thing. I couldn't see where it was going after that. Up into the cables, maybe. Or into the motor. I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. I climbed into the cart next to Maxwell. He still had the phone to his ear. "Yeah," he said. "We're going." He hung up, pocketed the phone, started the engine but didn't turn the headlights on. "Hold on," he said. We rolled forward into the dark. The fog came in fast. We'd been driving maybe 2 minutes. cutting between container stacks on a service road I hadn't seen before, when the air thickened. 1 second I could see the rows on either side of us. The next second the containers were shadows. The next they were gone. Maxwell kept the cart lights off. I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. The asphalt under us disappeared into gray nothing, and the overhead work lights were just faint halos floating above. I figured he'd slow down. He didn't. He drove steady, maybe 15 miles per hour, hands loose on the wheel. His head turned left and right like he was reading the fog for landmarks I couldn't see. "Lane C's on the west edge," he said. "Past the fuel depot. We're taking the back route." I didn't ask why. I already knew. Same reason we'd avoided it earlier. Same reason the rules said stay off it after 217. Except now we were heading straight for it. I heard something clang deep in the container rows to our left. Metal on metal, sharp and echoing. Then another clang further away. Then a third one even further, like dominoes falling in reverse. "Trucks?" I said. "No trucks scheduled till 6, Maxwell said. The clanging kept going. Irregular rhythm, no pattern I could follow. Maxwell didn't slow down. We turned right at an intersection I didn't recognize. The fog pressed in tighter, and I couldn't see the front of the cart anymore. Just the steering wheel and Maxwell's hands and the gray wall ahead. Then I saw the figure, standing in the road maybe 30 feet out, wearing a reflective vest that caught what little light there was and threw it back at us in dull yellow-green stripes. The figure raised one arm and waved, slow, deliberate, the same motion I'd seen 100 times from dispatchers and ground crew. "Maxwell," I said. "I see him." Maxwell didn't touch the brake. The figure kept waving. We got closer, 20 feet, 15. I could see the vest clearly now. Standard high-vis with the reflective tape in horizontal bands across the chest and arms, but I couldn't see the person wearing it. The fog swallowed everything above the shoulders and below the waist. Just the vest, floating in the gray, waving us forward. "That's dispatch, right?" I said. "No," Maxwell said. 10 feet. "The vest's fake," Maxwell said. 5 feet. I braced against the seat. Maxwell didn't swerve. The cart drove straight through where the figure was standing, and I felt nothing. No impact, no resistance. Just fog closing behind us and the road continuing forward into more gray. I turned and looked back. The vest was still there, waving, getting smaller as we drove away. Then the fog swallowed it, and it was gone. Maxwell kept driving. "Don't look back," he said. I faced forward and kept my hands on my knees. The clanging in the container rows got louder. The cart rolled forward maybe another 30 feet before the engine just quit. Not sputtering, not grinding down, just dead. 1 second we were moving, the next we were coasting to a stop in complete silence. Maxwell didn't swear or hit the wheel. He just looked at the gauge, which showed 3/4 battery, then turned the key. Nothing. Not even a click. I figured a loose connection or maybe something shorted out. "Battery's still good," I said. "I know." We were at the mouth of Lane C. I could see the faded paint on the asphalt where the lane designation started. White letters maybe 2 feet tall that had been run over enough times they were barely readable. Container stacks rose on both sides, taller than the others we'd passed, maybe 6 or 7 high. The fog pressed in tight, but I could still make out the shapes. Then the horn went off. Same sound as before, low and deep, vibrating through my chest more than my ears. But this time it wasn't distant. It came from inside the stacks, somewhere to our left, maybe 50 feet back. Like someone had mounted a foghorn between containers and aimed it straight at the lane. I checked my watch, 2:17. Maxwell was already out of the cart. He didn't say anything, just stood next to the driver's side door with his hand on the frame, scanning the stacks. The horn sounded again, same tone, same length. I felt it in my teeth. "We need to move," I said. "Cart's dead. Then we walk." Maxwell didn't answer. He was looking past me, toward the far end of Lane C where it disappeared into fog. His jaw was tight. I'd seen that look before on job sites when someone realized a mistake couldn't be undone. I stepped down from the cart to check the wheels. Maybe we could push it. Maybe the brake was stuck. I don't know. I just needed to do something. My boot hit the ground and sank. Not much, maybe half an inch, but asphalt doesn't give. I lifted my foot and looked down. The surface looked the same, cracked pavement, oil stains, the usual, but it felt wrong. Soft. I pressed my boot down again and watched it sink another quarter inch, like stepping on wet sand. The smell hit me a second later. Low tide. That specific mix of salt and rot and seaweed baking in the sun. Except there was no sun and we were 100 yards from the water. I crouched and touched the asphalt with my glove. It looked solid. Felt solid too at first. Then my fingers pressed through the surface and I felt wetness underneath. Cold. Gritty. Maxwell. He was beside me before I finished saying his name. He looked at the ground where my hand was, then at the cartwheels, which had sunk maybe an inch into the asphalt. He straightened and backed up 2 steps onto pavement that didn't give. "Stay on the edges," he said. I pulled my hand back and stood. My glove was dry. No water, no sand, just the feeling of it still on my fingers. The horn went off a third time, and I reached for my phone. Not the radio. The actual phone in my pocket, the one I hadn't used all shift because there was no one to call. But security had a number. Dispatch had a number. Someone had to know what was happening in Lane C at 2:17 in the morning. I got the phone halfway out before Maxwell's hand closed over mine. "Don't. We need to call someone. Security uses radios," Maxwell said. "Same system as dispatch, same frequencies." I looked at him. So radios are how the yard talks back. He let go of my hand and I slid the phone back into my pocket. The horn had stopped. The fog sat heavy and still around us, and the only sound was my breathing and the faint hum of work lights somewhere behind the stacks. Maxwell started walking along the edge of Lane C, staying on the solid pavement where it met the container row. I followed, keeping my boots on firm ground. The smell didn't fade. If anything, it got stronger, like the lane was soaking up seawater from below. We made it maybe 20 feet before I saw the container. It was on the bottom row of the left-hand stack, about chest height on a chassis. Standard 40-footer, blue paint with white Maersk lettering. The door was open, not wide, just cracked, maybe an inch. No seal. I stopped. Maxwell kept walking, then realized I wasn't with him and turned back. "Don't," he said. "I'm not going to look inside." "Good." I walked up to the container and grabbed the door handle. Cold metal, rough with salt corrosion. I pulled it shut in one smooth motion and heard the latch catch. The bang echoed off the stacks just like it had at Crane 5. I stepped back. The latch popped. Not slowly. Not like it hadn't caught. It just popped open with a sharp metallic click, and the door swung out an inch. I stared at it. Maxwell was beside me now, not saying anything. I reached for the handle again and pulled the door shut harder this time. Made sure the latch seated. Heard the bolt slide home. I stepped back. 3 seconds, maybe 4. The latch popped again. Same click, same inch of gap. Then the tapping started. Steady, deliberate, metal on metal, like someone knocking on the inside wall of the container with a wrench handle. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more taps. "We're leaving," Maxwell said. I didn't move. The tapping continued. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I've been on enough job sites to know what that sounds like. That's someone signaling. That's someone trapped and trying to get attention because they can't yell loud enough, or the air's running out, or they're hurt and can't move. That's someone who needs help. Nelson. I knew the rules. I'd read the card. I'd seen Maxwell kick the last door shut without a second thought. But the tapping kept going, and all I could think about was some dock worker who'd climbed inside to check a load or fix a tie down, and the door had swung shut behind him, locked him in, left him in the dark with no phone and no radio and no way out. I reached for the handle. Maxwell didn't stop me this time. He just stepped back. I pulled the door open, not all the way, just 2 inches, just enough to look inside. No cargo, no darkness. A hallway, clean, brightly lit. The kind of overhead fluorescence you see in office buildings, the ones with the white plastic diffusers that make everything look flat and too bright. The floor was carpet, not industrial, not the kind you see in warehouses, office carpet. Gray with those little flecks of blue and black that are supposed to hide stains. The smell hit me next. New paint. That chemical tang that gets in your throat and stays there. At the far end of the hallway, maybe 30 feet back, someone was standing. Jenna. She looked exactly the same. Same height, same dark hair, worn smooth and straight past her shoulders. Same fitted slacks and blouse she used to wear to work, back when she had the job at the insurance company in Long Beach. She wasn't moving, just standing there with her arms at her sides, watching me. "Charles," she said. Her voice sounded close, too close for 30 feet, like she was standing right on the other side of the door. "You can step inside," she said. "It's safe." I didn't move. My hand was still on the door handle. The metal was warm now, not hot, just warm, like it had been sitting in the sun. "The debts will stop," Jenna said. "The eviction, all of it. You just have to come inside." She wasn't smiling. She never smiled much, even when we were good, but her face had that look, the one she used to give me when I'd done something she didn't approve of but wasn't surprised by. Calm disappointment. "You don't have to stay out there," she said. I leaned forward, not stepping, just leaning, trying to see past her, down the hallway, trying to figure out what the hell I was looking at. That's when I saw the floor. The carpet was wet. Not soaked, not puddled. Just a thin layer of water covering the entire surface, reflecting the fluorescent lights above. It looked like the hallway had been underwater and someone had drained it 5 minutes ago. Water was still dripping from the ceiling tiles. Slow drops, falling one at a time, hitting the carpet without a sound. Jenna was standing in it. The water came up maybe half an inch over her shoes. She didn't seem to notice. Maxwell's hand locked around my arm and yanked me back hard enough that my shoulder popped. The container door slammed shut with a bang that rang off every stack in the lane. I stumbled into him and caught myself on the cart frame. The foghorn stopped. Just cut off mid-note. Not a fade. Not a wind down. Gone. The silence hit harder than the noise had. My ears rang with it. I could hear my own breathing and Maxwell's and nothing else. No hum from the work lights, no distant truck engines, no water lapping somewhere it shouldn't be. Just us standing there in the fog at the mouth of Lane C with the container door shut and Jenna gone. I figured that was it. Whatever had opened up was closed now. The horn was done. We could get back in the cart and finish the shift, and I could pretend the hallway hadn't been real. Then the radio in my pocket spoke. Not Maxwell's radio. Mine. The one he'd ripped the battery out of 2 hours ago in the shop. Charles Nelson, Maxwell Herman. The voice came through clear, no static, just a calm, professional tone like dispatch calling a standard job. My hand went to my vest pocket where the radio was clipped, and I felt it vibrating slightly against my ribs, even though the battery pack was gone. Maxwell didn't move. His hand was still on my arm. "Charles Nelson and Maxwell Herman, please acknowledge." I reached for the radio, and Maxwell's other hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. He shook his head once, His jaw was locked tight and his eyes stayed on the container door. The radio kept going. Gate logs now show you both clocked out at 02:41. Your shift is complete. Please proceed to the exit. I looked at Maxwell. He let go of my wrist but didn't say anything. The voice continued. Same calm tone. Sunrise is at 06:22. Leaving through the wrong gate will turn you around. You'll walk until you reach the water. This is for your safety. Maxwell finally moved. He pulled the dead radio off my belt, turned it over in his hand, and confirmed the battery compartment was still empty. Then he dropped it on the asphalt. It hit with a plastic crack, and the voice kept talking. Please use the gate you entered through. Any other exit will not recognize you. The radio went quiet. Not off. Just waiting. I asked what that meant. Maxwell stepped on the radio. It crunched under his boot, but I could still see the little red LED on the side glowing faint through the fog. It means the yard's got us logged out, he said. We're not supposed to be here anymore. So we leave. Through the wrong gate, and we don't leave. We loop. Walk in circles until we're too tired to know which way is out. He looked past me toward where the lane disappeared into fog. Or until we give up and walk into the water because it's easier. I thought about Jenna in the hallway saying the debts would stop. I thought about the eviction notice folded in my glove box and the $2,400 I didn't have. What do we do? Maxwell looked at his watch. 4:53. He pulled out his phone and checked the screen, then shook his head. No signal. He pocketed it and turned back toward the cart. We make Crane 7 actually trip. We already cut the disconnect. Yeah, and it's still live. He grabbed his tool bag from the cart bed. Disconnect didn't work because the crane's not on the grid anymore. It's running on something else, something the yard fed it when the water started climbing. I didn't ask what. I was learning that what didn't matter as much as how to stop it. So we force a fault, Maxwell said. A real one. Dead short straight into the frame. Make the whole thing trip so hard the yard can't keep it live. He slung the bag over his shoulder. That's the only reset. We kill Crane 7 for real and maybe the logs reset too. Maybe the gates remember we're still clocked in. And if they don't? He didn't answer. He just started walking back the way we'd come, boots crunching on solid pavement at the edge of the lane. The fog was still thick, but the smell had faded. Just regular salt air now. I grabbed my own bag and followed. We passed the container I'd opened. The door was shut tight. No gap, no tapping. I kept walking. Maxwell moved fast but careful, checking each turn before committing, scanning the stacks like he expected them to shift. I stayed close. My back was holding, but I could feel the tightness creeping into my lower spine again. Probably from Maxwell yanking me back. Probably from the cold and the damp and 4 hours of work on a body that wasn't quite healed. We turned left at an intersection I didn't recognize, and I saw the service signs. They were standard port directional signs, yellow metal with black arrows and berth numbers stenciled on. One pointed right toward berths 138 through 142. Another pointed left toward the fuel depot. A third pointed straight ahead toward the admin lot. I looked at the right-hand sign showing berths 138, 142. That was where we needed to go. Crane 7 was at berth 140. Maxwell stopped and checked his map. He unfolded it and held it under one of the overhead work lights that had started glowing again now that we were out of lane C. He traced a line with his finger, looked up at the signs, then back at the map. This way, he said, and turned left toward the fuel depot. I asked if Crane 7 wasn't to the right. Map says left. I looked back at the sign. The arrow pointing right still said berths 138, 142 in clean black stencil. We walked 20 feet and I glanced back again. The arrow was pointing left now. Same sign, same stencil, just reversed. I faced forward and didn't look again. Maxwell kept the map out and checked it every 30 seconds. The The fog was thinning. I could see container stacks again and the glow of work lights further down the rows. We passed the fuel depot and turned right, and I recognized the road. This was the main terminal road, straight shot to berth 140. Except there was a gate across it, not a permanent gate. A chain-link panel on wheels, the kind they use for temporary closures. It was padlocked to a post on one side and stretched all the way across both lanes. A red and white sign hung from the center. Road closed. Use alternate route. Maxwell stopped 10 feet back. He checked the map again, then looked left and right. No alternate route, just container stacks on both sides. He walked up to the gate and examined the lock. Standard port padlock, thick shackle. He pulled a pair of bolt cutters from his tool bag. "This wasn't here before," I said. "Doesn't matter." He positioned the cutters on the shackle and squeezed. The metal resisted, then gave with a sharp crack. The lock fell to the asphalt and Maxwell pushed the gate open just wide enough for us to slip through. It rolled smooth on its wheels and clanged against the post when it swung back. We kept moving. Crane 7 came into view 2 minutes later, still lit, still humming. The water was worse. It wasn't a puddle anymore. It was a column, a solid dark mass rising from the asphalt straight up the support leg into the crane housing, thick enough now that I couldn't see the steel through it. The surface moved slow, rippling like something alive, climbing steady. Maxwell stopped at the 20-foot mark. Same place we'd parked the cart before. The red disconnect box was still open. Lever still down. No power supposed to be flowing. I walked up to it and put my hand on the metal casing. It was warm. Not hot, just warm. Like it had been sitting in the sun. Except the sun wasn't up and the metal should have been cold from the night air. I pulled my hand back and the warmth stayed on my palm. I could feel it pulsing faint and rhythmic. Not my own heartbeat. Something slower. Maxwell came up beside me and looked into the disconnect box. The lugs were exposed. Thick copper terminals where the main power lines connected. They should have been dead. Cold metal with no current. "We need a dead short," he said. "Something that'll dump everything straight to ground. Make the fault so big the yard can't ignore it." I opened my tool bag and pulled out a grounding strap. Heavy braided copper with alligator clips on both ends. I also grabbed a crescent wrench from the side pocket. Maxwell watched me. "You done this before?" "Not like this. It's gonna arc. Don't touch the frame when it goes." I nodded. My hands were already moving. I clipped one end of the grounding strap to the wrench handle, making sure the connection was solid. Then I clipped the other end to the crane frame where the disconnect box mounted. The metal was warm there too. I looked at the lugs, 2 of them, positive and ground. I needed to bridge them with the wrench and let the current find the shortest path to earth through the strap. Maxwell stepped back 3 feet. I wrapped my hand in my sleeve and positioned the wrench head over the lugs. Then I shoved it in hard and let go. The arc flashed blue and silent. No crack, no buzz, just light. It lit up the whole crane base, and I saw my shadow stretching long across the asphalt behind me. The wrench glowed white-hot for half a second, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. Then every container in Lane C answered. One synchronized bang. 50, 60, maybe 100 doors slamming shut all at once. The sound rolled across the yard like thunder, and I felt it in my chest. The water column dropped, just fell straight down, all of it. Gallons of dark salt water crashing onto the asphalt and soaking my boots and splashing up to my knees. It was cold, freezing cold. My feet went numb instantly. The crane went dark. No hum, no lights, dead. The foghorn started up again somewhere behind the stacks and then cut off mid-breath. Choked. Gone. I stood there with water dripping off my coveralls and my boots full of freezing seawater and the wrench still glowing faint red in the disconnect box. Maxwell exhaled slow. That's it. The yard was quiet. Normal quiet. I could hear a truck engine in the distance and the faint beep of a reversing alarm in the wind coming off the water. I pulled the wrench out with my sleeve still wrapped around my hand. The metal had cooled, but the handle was scorched black and the strap had melted halfway through. By the time we got back to the gate, it was 5:45 and the sky was starting to gray at the edges. Not sunrise yet, but close. Our badges didn't work. I swiped mine at the card reader next to the guard shack and got a red light and a beep that meant no access. Maxwell tried his. Same result. The guard shack was empty. Lights on inside, but no one at the desk. Then I saw Sadie walking toward us from the HR trailer with a paper logbook under her arm. She looked tired. More tired than when I'd met her 6 hours ago. Her hair was coming loose from the ponytail, and she had a coffee stain on her vest. She stopped on the other side of the gate and opened the logbook, flipped through a few pages, found what she was looking for, and ran her finger down a column of handwritten names. "You're not in here," she said. Maxwell leaned against the fence. "We just tripped Crane 7. Check the fault log." "There's no fault log for tonight. No work orders either." She closed the logbook. "The yard reset. You two were never here." I looked at Maxwell. He didn't look surprised. Sadie continued. "That means no record, no pay trail, no union hours." She looked at me. "No proof you worked." I thought about the $2,400 I still owed and the eviction notice that was still real and the 11 days I had left. "We walked out the right gate," I said. "You did." She nodded. "That's why you're standing here and not walking circles in the fog." She pulled a pen from her pocket and made a mark in the logbook. "I'm logging you both out manually, off the books. It won't help with pay, but it'll close the loop so the yard stops looking for you." She clicked the pen and tucked it back in her pocket. Then she reached over and unlocked the gate from the inside. It swung open. "Go home. Don't come back tonight." Maxwell walked through first. I followed, still carrying my tool bag and the burned wrench. Sadie called after me. "Charles." I stopped and turned. "You refused it, didn't you?" She didn't wait for me to answer. "Good. The ones who take the offer don't come back the same." I didn't ask what she meant. I just nodded and kept walking. My truck was still in the gravel lot where I'd left it. Maxwell's too. He threw his bag in the bed of his Ford and climbed in without saying anything. His engine started, and he pulled out onto the access road heading north. I stood there for a minute with the burned wrench in my hand and my boots still wet and my back aching from the shock of the arc and the cold. The ocean had stopped trying to collect me for the night. But the debts were still real. The eviction was still real. I'd refused the hallway, and now I had nothing to show for 6 hours of work, except a ruined wrench and wet socks. I got in my truck and drove back to Long Beach with the sunrise turning the water orange behind me.